picture oil before it became a headline. Not a black gooey monster, not a stock chart, but a time capsule. Deep underground, ancient pressure does the slow work, squeezing leftover carbon from rock that has been waiting longer than any human country to exist. Now, jump to the first human move. You drill. And drilling is not just a hole, it is a financial machine. Steel, rigs, labour, permits, risk insurance, and the quiet math of timelines. Once crude is brought up, the real work starts immediately, because crude is messy and it cannot be burned in its raw form. It must be cleaned, separated, and engineered into products with different boiling points and different jobs. If you think of refining as chemistry, fine. But in practice, it is also logistics, staffing, and heat management. Towers inside refineries do the sorting. Large units need steady feed, steady power, and uninterrupted maintenance. A refinery that runs well is like an orchestra that never misses a cue. A refinery that runs poorly forces rerouting, emergency purchases, and sudden price swings. Who buys the oil once it is refined? Here is the less obvious twist. Lots of buyers are not buying gasoline directly. They are buying time, reliability, and specific grades. A shipping company does not want just fuel. It wants consistency at sea, delivery schedules across ports, and contracts that survive weather, strikes, and sudden route changes. Power plants care about predictable supply because blackouts have political consequences. Industrial buyers, from chemical plants to manufacturers of everyday materials, buy feedstock for plastics and other goods, and that demand can keep moving even when people think the world is slowing down. Then comes the question, how does it move? Most people imagine giant tankers and yes, oceans matter. But what people forget is that movement happens in layers. Crude might cross one ocean, get processed, then products move again through another network. Pipelines carry the bulk where geography allows, but where borders, politics, or terrain complicate pipelines, trucks and rail step in. Those smaller channels are not minor. They become the emergency bloodstream, the local response when a major route is interrupted. Oil is a networked system, not one pipeline, not one port, not one refinery. It is a chain where each link depends on the last. That is why a disturbance can travel, not through fire, but through contracts. Now zoom into the pressure points and pay attention to the people whose jobs are mostly invisible. In Iran, the issue is not only that sanctions exist, it is how sanctions reshape the geography of trust. Shipping routes change, documentation gets complicated, and counterparties demand extra protection. Costs rise because complexity costs money, even when the fuel itself stays the same. Insurance pricing and legal risk become part of the supply price, and the market translates that risk into higher numbers. Also, sanctions tend to squeeze options. When certain routes are restricted, buyers and sellers must bargain under tighter constraints. That means fewer efficient paths and more detours. Some of the world's fuel gets rerouted through networks that are less transparent, where speed and certainty are harder to guarantee. Even when oil reaches customers, the path can add friction at every step. Loading delays, inspection requirements, and last-minute changes that ripple through inventories. What does that feel like on the ground? For traders, it feels like constant recalculation, every shipment a mini-negotiation. For import-dependent industries, it feels like uncertainty, the fear that the next delivery could be delayed. And for consumers, it can show up as volatility, not necessarily as empty shelves, but as price pressure and unstable expectations. In the USA, the pressure point operates differently, and it is tied to refinery capacity and global flow. The United States has a huge refining ecosystem, but it is not isolated from the rest of the planet. Crude quality matters. Some refineries are configured for certain types of crude, others require more adjustments. When global supply shifts, the feedstock mix changes. That means the cost structure changes too. Then there is the calendar of maintenance. Refineries have downtime planned for safety and repairs. When planned maintenance overlaps with an international disruption, the system has less cushion. Inventories shrink faster, and the market reacts. That reaction reaches the pump not because gasoline is directly controlled by a single event, but because the market bids aggressively for whatever supply remains. Conflicts ripple quickly because of one simple truth. Fuel is a timing business. If a shipment is delayed, a contract is renegotiated, and a refinery has less feedstock tomorrow than it did yesterday. Even small changes can shift pricing because demand does not wait. So let's step outside the usual political framing and focus on the hidden infrastructure of power. Think about the ports. Ports are not passive. They are schedules, tugs, cranes, inspections, storage yards, and paperwork that must line up perfectly. If a port faces congestion, crude can arrive but not unload on time. If storage tanks fill, the next shipment has nowhere to go. That triggers spot buying at higher rates and forces the downstream chain to adapt. Now consider storage itself. Storage is a shock absorber. When markets expect trouble, traders buy and store. When markets expect calm, storage empties. That means oil prices often reflect expectations about what will happen later, not only what is happening now. And in the middle of it all are trades and intermediaries that many viewers never think about. Trading companies do more than move physical barrels. They manage timing differences between regions, translate currency risk, and hedge against volatility. Their decisions can affect which crude arrives at which refinery and which refineries get stressed. If you want a fresh way to picture this, imagine oil as a language made of contracts. Crude is one dialect. Refined products are another. Shipping is a grammar rule. Pipelines and rail are roads. When sanctions or conflicts interrupt the rules, the translation fails. Markets scramble to interpret meaning, and that scramble becomes price. Here is a concrete example of how ripple effects can feel without focusing on one specific war or one specific headline. Suppose a region that typically supplies certain crude grades becomes harder to export. Refineries that rely on that feedstock must replace it. The replacements might be available, but they might arrive by a different route, with a different schedule, and at a different quality level. The refinery needs to adjust operations. That adjustment can take time, so capacity becomes tighter. Meanwhile, downstream products compete for limited storage and transport. The market then bids up the cost across the chain. The fascinating part is that the consumer often experiences the end of the story, while the chain began weeks earlier. Contracts get revised, shipments rebooked, insurance renegotiated, and storage rearranged. By the time fuel hits retail prices, the real disruption already happened upstream. Now shift your attention to who is often underestimated: local logistics workers. Truck drivers, rail operators, warehouse crews, and dispatchers. They are the people who make the network real, especially in countries where small routes fill the gaps. When bigger routes fail, these workers operate under pressure because demand does not pause. If a convoy gets delayed, if a rail yard backlog grows, you see an immediate change in how quickly stations can replenish. And that brings us to a mindset that is less common but more accurate. Oil markets are not just about supply and demand. They are about reliability under stress. Can you deliver on time? Can you insure it? Can you process it? Can you store it without losing it? Can your counterparties keep their promises across jurisdictions? Sanctions in Iran raise costs not only by blocking shipments, but by making every step more fragile. Global conflicts in other regions can raise costs in the USA, not only by changing what oil exists, but by changing how quickly it can reach refineries and how easily those refineries can keep running. So the next time you hear oil described as power or greed, remember something more structural. Oil is an ancient material, yes, but its modern impact is created by systems. Wells that become pathways, refineries that become filters, ports that become junctions, traders that become translators, and logistics workers who turn paper agreements into physical movement. This is why a disturbance can travel. Not like a single event, but like a chain of delayed decisions. Barrels move, then they are sorted, then they are scheduled, then they are delivered to cities and industries. When any part of that choreography stutters, the cost of time shows up in the final number people pay. Crude oil is Earth's leftover, but what turns it into gasoline and plastics is global coordination. And that coordination lives on the edge of uncertainty, where shipping routes, refinery uptime, contract terms, and geopolitical risk all meet. The pressure points are not just in maps. They are in supply chains, in inventories, and in the thin margin between delivery on time and delivery too late.